Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where we discover the communities that are making a difference in the lives of others. Our self-discovery is something we are all making on our life's journey. Here you will find the people that will be your guidance, that will be your inspiration, that will be there for you in support on your journey of life. Do enjoy. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Eco Solutions right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest today is Stephanie Miller. And we have got something that you need to listen to, how to reduce waste this Thanksgiving and every day. She says there's 5 key tips to keeping the amount of waste down during the Thanksgiving and every day. What is the 80-20 rule on how to avoid plastic and food waste? What are easy and affordable things we can do now to help our planet? How can we recycle better? How do festivities like Thanksgiving offer us the opportunity to deal with food waste? She has spent her career looking for solutions to climate challenges at a macro level, and she began to question what could be done on the individual level. She wondered how you could have an impact, or perhaps less of an impact, by reducing personal carbon waste footprint. The question she began to look at: what can we as individuals do to reverse the current climate waste crisis? Could individual action have a ripple effect, and could it lead to a systemic change? If so, how could busy people make those necessary changes? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today, how people can make those necessary changes. Because it's not just, let's be nice to the planet. This is, buck up, folks. If you're not nice to the planet, she's going to rebel. And we're not going to have that opulence of food and everything else that we think that grows at the supermarket. So change isn't just something we would like you to do. It really is something that we all have to do, isn't it, Stephanie? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's great to join you. And yes, I think it's something we all need to do. But the good news is so many of the really impactful things that we can do as individuals are not that difficult. So,
right.
Well, we can get into that. But that's what I think is so empowering, is when we realize we can make a difference.
Yes. And that's the thing, is that everybody is looking for government or industry to change. And it's like, well, when they change, I will change. But when we look at industries or shopping malls, shoppies like Walmart, etc., we start noticing there is more vegan options, more vegetarian options, bring your own bag, less waste and more biodegradable. And the thing is, that didn't come about necessarily from them. That came about from us demanding the change. So we have the power within us to make that change happen, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, I really think solutions need to come from the 3 big players. Government, certainly, through some regulation is needed. Private sector, and we can get into that a little bit more, because I think you're absolutely right. Private sector is driven by lots of things. Profit for most, but profit comes from keeping their customers happy. And the third really powerful group is we as individuals. If we can all sort of corral around the right things to do and send the messages to both government through our votes and to businesses, I think we have a huge impact to make. So yes, it's not all on government and individual. And we've just seen the results of COP26 in Glasgow, and lots of important decisions were made there, not nearly enough, but some really important ones. And I think most of us and I've been to 5 of those, in my day, leading climate change, 5 of those kind of conferences. Those are important, but a lot of the stuff that happens in between, from year to year, can happen without we at the personal level, at the individual level. And I actually think Greta Thunberg is, hats off to her, but she has changed the conversation that happens inside those rooms. We can change the conversation, all of us of all generations. So that's what gives me hope.
I'm always saying, and I say this virtually in every show, is we're always pointing the finger. Somebody else's responsibility. But while we're doing that, there's 3 pointing back at us. and say, well, what are we doing? We know plastic is bad. It's bad for our landfills. It's bad for all of the living creatures. It's certainly bad for our sea life. We're seeing whales and many other creatures being beached, just digesting the plastic, which they can't digest, folks. It just literally suffocates their organs. And we know that this is bad, and we know that there are alternatives. There are the biodegradable bags. If you have to have things in a plasticky type container, we can take our own shopping bags and fill those up, reusable, and not have to have plastic bags. We could be also more conscious about even supporting our local farmers and buying locally instead of always from the grocery store, where very often the stuff is coming from another country, wrapped up in preservatives and everything. That's another show, but
no, well,
but
it's very relevant.
yeah. And the thing is that we know this, we can't bury our heads in the sand anymore. We know this change is necessary, but a lot of the time people get intimidated. But I'll take a shopping bag in there. I'll try not to buy anything wrapped up in plastic, but I don't know what else to do. And that's what you're here for today, is to help us find those simple things that we can do. And Thanksgiving is coming up in America. We've had ours here in Canada, and a lot of waste has happened at that time, right? And it's how can we combat that? And then look upon it as, well, if I could do it for Thanksgiving, I could do this every day of my life.
Yes, so we should know that 25% more waste is created between the Thanksgiving holiday and the New Year's holiday.
Wow.
And I think that's a US figure, but I think it's equally true of Canada. I know you've had your Thanksgiving already. And that waste is primarily two sources. Food waste, quite obviously. We just finished Halloween. More than 1 billion pounds of pumpkin end up in the landfill after Halloween. So there's lots we can talk about that too, because some people still have their pumpkins. I still have the pumpkin in the front of the house. And Thanksgiving is a big one, and then we've got all the December holidays.
Yeah.
So the two things are food waste and packaging. Those are the sources of waste that increase dramatically over the holiday period. And there's lots we can do about it. We don't have to do everything, but I think if we start this year, we can start to build some really good habits. And I can go through those with you if you'd like, on the food waste side and on the packaging side.
Yes, actually, first of all, I just want to talk about pumpkin. I learned actually this last week in a show how the pumpkin that we use for carving is actually brilliant to go onto land to absorb toxins. So, it could be a cleaning patch for your vegetable patch, or maybe take all the pumpkins and areas that are having contamination, throw the pumpkins in there and then throw them away afterwards. Nature always has an answer, doesn't it? But yes, please lead us into those 5 points.
Yeah, well, just maybe since you brought up the pumpkin, because it is a dramatic example of the food waste during the holidays. Let me just say, any vegetables, fruits, and in this case, pumpkins that come around with the holidays need to end up in a proper disposal. And obviously the best thing to do with all of your fruits and vegetables, and including your pumpkin, is to use as much of them, for the goodness of the pies. I don't make pumpkin pies myself. I do roast the seeds. I only have one.
Caramelized pumpkin is wonderful with a little brown sugar and butter. Yum, yum.
There are so many recipes. And in fact, there's a great site in Canada called Love Food, Hate Waste that has some great ideas for what to do with your pumpkin in terms of consuming it. Right. But whether you use it for decoration or you use it also for eating, which is great, you're always going to end up with some pumpkin residue, some pumpkin waste. And then the question is, where does that end up? So that we avoid this more than 1 billion pounds of pumpkin in the landfill. So maybe first I just need to quickly remind people who may not know, or this was news for me a few years ago, why should we care that pumpkins and other compostables end up in the landfill instead of get composted by nature or through industrial composting? The reason we need to care is that when you have organic waste that ends up in landfills, there's no oxygen introduced into the decomposition process. And the result is that methane is produced. And methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. So here we had the COP26, they signed a big global methane pledge. Well, guess what? One of the biggest sources of methane is landfill waste. One of the biggest sources of food waste in Canada and the US is we at the household level. So this is great because it means there's something we can do about it.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the pumpkin. We need to make sure it doesn't end up in the landfill. My pumpkin, I have a compost bin, so mine will end up in my compost bin. My sister, who lives about 15 minutes away, doesn't have a compost bin. She's going to bring her pumpkins to mine. But there are great resources online. I mean, I think this time of year, you can even just Google pumpkin disposal near me. And there are very often farms that will take them. In the DC area where I live, we have programs that will take the pumpkins for homeless people so that they can, not homeless people, but food, people who have a food deficit, and those pumpkins will be turned into magnificent things that are edible. So we need to have a little bit of consciousness about where it's going to end up. So for Thanksgiving, I would say number one thing is for any of those compostable fruits and vegetables, and we will all be in the US Thanksgiving very soon, starting to buy all of those. They need to, and the scraps need to end up in the compost bin. So that's I would say the first thing around food waste. The second thing I would say is also around food waste. Many of us, whether it's for the December holidays or upcoming US Thanksgiving, will purchase a turkey or some other large piece of meat. And in general, not just around the holidays, we need to have a plan for what we will do with the leftovers.
Right.
If you are inviting people over for a feast, then consider that you could send some of these portions home with people. You need
Tell
to
them to bring a container. Right.
Tell them to bring their containers to your house, or if you happen to have a lot of them and you can get rid of them, great, send them home with your containers. But make sure, because nobody ever buys. I've never met anyone who buys a turkey or a ham with the intention of finishing exactly what they buy at their holiday feast. There are always leftovers, right? That's part of the point. So let's make sure that we're thinking ahead. And again, the guests will appreciate, if you're the one hosting it, having a bit of a meal the next day or a few days later. The other thing around leftovers is and all of this involves a tiny bit of planning, but not, you don't have to reinvent your life. I just made a big vat of chicken stock for the recipes that I know I will make for the US Thanksgiving. If you make your own, and that's such an easy thing to do, I mean, you don't even need a recipe. I just posted a recipe on my social media, but it's really almost embarrassing to call it a recipe. You just cover everything with water. But, when you do that, you avoid two things. You avoid the cost of buying stock from the store, and you avoid all the packaging that stock comes in when it's store-bought. You also happen to put that what otherwise would be food waste to a very good second use.
Yeah.
So that's really important. I think if we move, those are the things around food waste. I think we need a plan for the turkey. We need a plan for the rest of the leftovers. Oh, and the most important thing I will say is, if you end up with food that after day 1 or day 2 is in your fridge and does not get eaten, by all means, put it in the freezer. You will thank yourself weeks later when you suddenly have a meal there. And we never do this. I never used to do this in a timely way, right? I'd always think, well, let me just leave it for another day. Tomorrow we'll have the leftovers. But after a while, if you really have a lot, you don't want to eat it for the 3rd day in a row. So freeze it. You'll be so happy to have, the ham or the turkey down the road. So
actually, before you go any further on that, I'll give a few of my tips here, because that's
I'd love to hear.
I've turkey soup. I love making turkey soup, and for me everything is in there, the bones come out, and then it's kind of either blended or it's a broth or whatever the case is, and then I freeze it for future so that I've got some for a couple of days, and then I feel like some of that turkey soup, and I can bring it out of the freezer. It's the same with the leftover food. I put it as a whole meal in the containers. So, and then, not just the turkey or just the ham or just that. I create a whole meal, throw it in the freezer. As a podcaster, very often I'm just too busy. It comes to the end of the day, and like I'm starving, I don't feel like cooking. Out of the freezer it comes, right? And go to the good old microwave or just heat it up in the oven, whatever the case is. But you've got a whole meal there. And it's like,
I love that.
and
That is so smart,
you don't have to
then
have
it takes
Christmas and
even-
Thanksgiving, only on Christmas and Thanksgiving. You can have it any day, right?
Yes. I love that. I will try to do that this year, actually, because I usually freeze, the turkey in one container, the cranberry sauce in another, and the vegetables. But I love that because you're right. Then it's one less step for you.
Yes.
It's 2 weeks or 3 weeks when you choose to defrost it. The other thing I would say about freezing, when I started freezing things more, first of all, I learned almost anything can be frozen. I had no idea dairy could be frozen too. So that was an eye-opener. But the other thing I realized when I really started doing this a lot is nothing is recognizable once it's frozen, right? I mean, even though you swear when you put it in the freezer, you will remember this was 2 turkey meals. In a month, you will not remember. So I've now become quite religious about labeling whatever I put in the freezer before it's too late, too unrecognizable.
Label and date.
Label and date is good too. I don't always date, but that's a smart thing to do too.
Especially if you're doing a lot of it, So just date it, because then everything has a date, But I personally love the leftovers, because if I'm cooking, I'm so busy cooking, I may sit down and eat, but you're hosting and everything else, right? You just don't get to enjoy it so much. So I love having the leftovers. I can really enjoy the meal at my own leisure without all the stress. So, and you can also be very creative with other ways of doing it. Turkey a la king, so many other things you can do with it that, don't throw it away. I live with an 88-year-old. I love her to death, but she's never known hunger. And so she's never kind of really and so she'll buy food and I don't feel like it. Oh, it's gone off now and I'll throw it away. And she knows that it gets my goat. So, yeah. And it's because, of her culture, kind of wasn't really kind of raised with that consequences of the waste. Yeah. But we do have consequences with the waste, as you were talking about with the methane. That's the same with, beef manufacturing, the methane that is released there, and the water resources that it's taking as well. Absolutely. We are killing our planet.
We are, and I'll tell you a shocking figure. And I used to lead climate change for the World Bank Group, but I did not know how profoundly important food waste was as part of the climate problem. So I saw the statistic a few years ago before I was writing the book, and it was shocking. It was that if food waste were measured in terms of greenhouse gas as a country, it would be ranked 3rd behind the US and China in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It is so profoundly impactful.
Right.
So, but again, the flip side, the opportunity there, the positive message is, because in rich countries like Canada and the US, most of the food waste happens not at the farm level, not transportation, not restaurants, not hotels, not even the grocery stores. 40% of food waste happens at the household level, and that's the single biggest contributor to food waste. So the good thing is, there's something when people say, oh, but I can't solve these problems. Right. These are problems for government. These are problems for, as you said at the beginning, for private sector to solve. I say, well, if you pick the right things, you actually can make a really big difference. And then if you get really positively contagious in your messaging about it, then you can influence a whole lot of
Yes.
other people to do it as well, like you are doing through your podcast, and as I do with anyone who happens to have to sit with me for more than 10 minutes.
And
I
your book, of
usually
course, which we will be
crack,
talking
correct,
about too.
and my
Your book.
book, and my
Yeah.
book, yes, yeah.
I think, we again, it's like, well, it doesn't affect me. It does affect you, and it will affect your children. Before we went on the show, I talked about here in BC, we've just had some devastating weather. Our major artery highway literally crumbled. My daughter's lost a friend from a mudslide that just buried the cars. One town completely underwater. People trapped between the floods and where the landslide was, held in their cars overnight until they could be airlifted. Another place has been flooded and explosions are happening, and never mind the livestock and the lives. I mean, this is a mess. This is a mess, and it's going to take a long time. How is this going to affect people? Well, that doesn't affect me. It's sad. It doesn't affect me. But if you live anywhere within the BC, it's going to affect the delivery of food. Because the highway is closed, the railways are closed, and we can't take things for granted that it will always be there. And at the beginning of the pandemic, look at the toilet paper crisis that went on, and we're going to see that again. And it's like, if you get creative within your own food and you're not wasting, and what can I do with this? How can I stretch this further? I don't need to panic, right? I don't need to throw away, or I don't need to do this or that. It's also so much more, never mind creative, but you feel so much more rewarded when you do something and know that you're not wasting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So life happens around us, and it has an effect on the way we buy, or when we can buy, or the shortages, and we do need to get creative. So instead of throwing something out, it's like, how can I be creative with this and create a different dish with it, or create a different that with it, or make my own cleaner, vinegar, lemon, and a few other things in there, and there's always a solution. And online, and like in your book, there is plenty of answers there. We've got to just step out of that mindset, right? And look and go, okay, I need to take this a step further.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And I will tell you, some of the most rewarding things I've done in the last few years have been, and I consider myself not a crafty person. I'm not a sewer. I don't have a lot of competence around arts and crafts, but I do love to cook. And I think you do have to cook if you're going to eliminate a lot of food waste. You don't have to be a chef, but you just have to have some basic competence in the kitchen. And as you said, there are so many creative ways of reusing packaging, and we can talk about that next, because I think, I have really, my eyes have been opened to both a lot of the consumption patterns that I had, a little bit helped not just by the zero waste lifestyle I've tried to pursue, but also by the pandemic, as you said. There's supply issues, so you do get more creative anyway. And I think it can be overwhelming for people to try to do all the DIY, make your own shampoo, make your own household cleaner. But you could do some of those things, and even some of those things eliminate a lot of plastic. I have started making my own household cleaner, and it's so easy. I mean, it doesn't even, I post about it every time I do it because it's so easy, and I want people to know, if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's like anything else. It just requires a tiny bit of foreshadowing of when you're going to run out of the things. So because you have to soak the citrus or whatever you're using for a few weeks in a dark cupboard before you put, add the vinegar to it. But that's it. It's vinegar, in my case, orange peels, and I like to throw in a few drops of like a eucalyptus oil just to take the edge off of the vinegar scent. It could not be easier. And as I say, if I can do it, anyone can do it.
But that's what our forefathers were doing before supermarkets popped up. We forget that, my parents' generation, They even had to churn their own butter. They
Yeah,
made their own bread. And we've got kind of lazy and complacent with the fact that now we don't even have to go into the grocery store. We can just order and pick it up outside. And
yes.
yeah, I understand convenience is very nice. But, what can we do just to be a little bit more mindful? Okay, I'm going to buy, I like your 80-20%. I'm an 80-20 vegan. 80% vegan, that 20%, a few things, especially if you're going out, or a couple of things that I find hard to give up, right?
Yes.
And that is also, for me, I feel okay. My kids are diehard, but I'm okay with
Good
the
for them.
80%.
Yes, yes.
And you don't have to become the fanatic. You don't have to, I got to do all of this or anything else. It's just simple things, isn't it? As you do one thing, and you see the results, and you see, oh, that's less waste, or I'm using this more, or I'm being more creative. And then you go, well, if I can do that, what else can I do?
You took the words out of my mouth. That's what I always say. And it's maybe I should just quickly explain. I found the 80-20 rule. About half the people I talked to knew what I was talking about, and the other half didn't. So maybe I should just quickly say what I
Yes.
mean by that.
Yeah.
The 80-20 rule is a concept I borrowed from economics and business. We used to talk in my workplace about, you don't want to you don't want to equally invest time in every client. Really, 20%, 80% of our business comes from 20% of our clients. So there's this kind of rule of thumb of focus your efforts on the most impactful thing.
Right.
So I set out to find the 80-20 rule for zero waste living, because there was no way I was going to get to zero waste. And in fact, none of us can right now because of the way our society is set up. But you can go a long way there. And so it's so rewarding to get, to know that you're having an impact and not to change your whole life around.
Right.
I had a very intensive career at an international development organization. And if you had told me, Stephanie, in a couple of years after you leave that organization, you're going to start making your own household cleaner, I would have laughed at you. There's no way. I'm sure I would have said that. So 80-20 for me is just about, let's not try to do everything or think we have to do everything.
Right.
Let's be really clear. If we're busy, what are the most impactful things that we could do? And through a lot of research that I did, I came up with 3 areas, 3 themes. And those 3 are focus on food, purge plastics, and recycle right. And the focus on food is exactly what we were just talking about. It's 2 things. It's food waste, which we spent a lot of time talking about why that's so important from a climate perspective. And secondly, also from a climate perspective, the meat-based diet is not working for our planet, right? It's just not sustainable. I am not a vegetarian. I will say that, very openly, but I try to be 80-20 about my approach to getting to a more plant-rich diet. My current goal, dinners are the really challenging thing because of the way I was raised. A meal is a meal if you've got some meat on the table. So I move toward, my goal is 4 dinners a week are vegetarian. And not an easy thing when your entire repertoire of cooking is, pork chops and chicken and beef. And so I have moved very consciously toward increasing more and more every year, every month, to a more plant-based diet. And so when I say focus on food, it's about trying to get that right in your life, meaning get it right for you, do what you can. I found it fascinating. I was not aware of this, but there's such a thing as carbon intensity of food. And you alluded to it earlier when you were talking about methane and beef, right? Beef and actually dairy cattle as well.
Yes.
So when you look at categories of food that we all, or many of us, consume, the most carbon intensive food at the very top of the charts is beef.
Yes.
1 kilogram of beef is responsible for producing 60 kilograms of carbon emissions.
Yeah.
But if you go just a little further down this carbon intensity chart, you find that chicken is 10 times less than beef in terms of carbon intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Only 6 kilograms instead of 60 kilograms of carbon emissions, so much less. And salmon, wild-caught salmon, is half as much as chicken. So you start to see, when you look at this in this way, and if you've got the 80-20 lens on, where you're trying to be as good as you can without maybe feeling like you've got to make so many radical transformations in your life that it's not going to be doable, and it's not going to be doable for your family, you realize for that example that every meal is a choice, right? Every meal, every time I set out to go shopping or cook a meal, I have a choice. Do I want to go all the way up the scale to the beef option, or can I keep it at the salmon or even lentil soup, or my 4 vegetarian dinners a week? But I think that's very empowering too, because if you're, I think I saw a figure somewhere that only about 5% of the population are vegetarian, which means fewer yet are vegan. And we need to increase that. But for those of us who, grew up with a certain lifestyle, and I feel terrible that I raised my son, who's now in college, along the same lines as I was raised, that, meat is the important part of the meal. Then you need to look at the margins, or can you begin to look at the margins on where you can start to chip away at the problem and make a difference?
I'm going to respond to that because I'm being very educated by my kids who are vegan.
And
my
they're
son,
the ones to educate us.
yeah. There is a product called Eve's, and they do ground beef, which is plant-based. And anything that you can use ground beef, you can use this, and it's absolutely delicious. You really can't tell the difference whatsoever.
Yeah.
They've come up with, chicken type things, fish and everything else. And today the vegan food is absolutely exceptional.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing I did on a show the other day when we were talking about health is actually, if you eat carbs and meat at the same time, it's extremely bad for your digestive system.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you're right.
So you can have carbs and vegetables. They complement each other. But actually meat, protein with your carbs are one of the reasons why that causes upset stomachs and gas and everything else, which I never knew. So although we were brought up, and I'm that generation too, meat and potatoes, right? You've got to have, the 2 vegetable, the meat and potatoes, and, that stable diet. It's actually wrong for our bodies. Yeah. And when you look at an elephant and you look at many other species of animals that are incredibly strong and, healthy, they are plant-based creatures. Yeah. And so, you don't want to sacrifice the taste. You don't have to. There are some exceptional vegan options there today, cheese and everything else. I'm still a little wonky on the cheese. There are some great cheese, but if I'm going out, I may have a cheese-based pasta or something. I occasionally eat chicken or turkey and some fish. Other than that, I don't touch any of the other meats whatsoever. Yeah. I did a show on the beef and the methane, but never mind the amount of damage the methane does, but it's also the amount of water that is needed.
It's actually in general.
Yes, it is causing a shortage of, we've just had flooding here, all very well, but we had droughts back in the summer, and we're seeing this around the world, and water is one of those commodities that we can't live without. So, the thing is, my daughter had a vegan wedding, and I know even one of my best friends said, what are we going to be served? And everybody was shocked at how delicious the food was. This is vegan? And
good for her.
Be adventurous. Just explore. There are some incredible amount of restaurants out there that have gone vegan, and it's not all about, nuts, legumes, and lettuce leaf. There are some incredible dishes, especially Asian ones, because they have been quite, predominantly a vegetarian or vegan anyway. So you don't have to sacrifice that to have a good meal. And you can also enjoy that meal. I mean, I made a spaghetti bolognese for my kids a while ago, and they loved it. And there was no difference in the kind of the texture and everything else. Shepherd's pie, which was one of our staples, and we don't have to go without. So it's just a question of, let's be adventurous. Let's try it out. Let's be open-minded.
Yes.
because we do need to be open-minded to these changes, because these changes are going to be forced upon us if we don't willingly go that way.
I think you're absolutely right. And I have not experimented a lot. You called it Eves or
Eves,
something?
yeah, Eves
Yes.
is very, very good.
In
Yeah.
the US, it's called, the two brands are Beyond Burger.
Beyond Meat, yeah, yeah.
Beyond Beef and the Impossible Burger.
Right.
And I just made a shepherd's pie last week, not with that. It was vegetarian shepherd's pie, and it tasted vegetarian, but it was very good. But I made a mental note that next time I'm going to try, instead of the black beans, I'm going to try to use the Beyond Beef and see how that is. My son is coming home from school soon, and I'm not going to trick him, but I think he would actually probably enjoy
We've
it.
served vegan and people haven't known it. I mean, what I do, if you want kind of a more textury type taste, chop up a lot of mushrooms in it too, because the mushrooms have a wonderful texture in that. Yeah.
Yes, and my son is a mushroom.
I'm a mushroom addict.
Yeah. So there were more. In fact, I threw extra mushrooms into the recipe. Yeah.
So there's, we're going to my daughter's for Christmas, and her household is diehard, no waste, and vegetarian, vegan, and all of that. They even built a passive house, which is an eco-friendly house, right? Yeah. So they're really diehard, and she's just doing us an entire, turkey faux dinner, and I know it's going to be delicious. So I think a lot of our problem with change is in the head.
Mindset, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I will tell you, I'm getting married in May.
Yay!
My second marriage, and my fiance and I spoke with the caterers last week, and it was the first time he and I had to kind of not have it out, but we had difference of opinion. I wasn't suggesting it be a vegan wedding, but I was
the options.
Vegan. But I wanted to increase those options, and also in his mind, you always have to have beef as an option.
Right.
And I reminded him about the chart in my book with the carbon intensity of food, and I said, "How about salmon?" And he said, "Well, but we have to have it." So we ended up with. Well, we haven't ended up anywhere, but we are leaning toward a vegan option and salmon and pork tenderloin. And pork is much less carbon intensive than beef by far, closer to chicken. So
if you go organic, right?
Yes,
if you go organic,
yes,
like farm produced, not manufactured, because. It's also something I've heard on many of the shows, and theory I've had for a very long time. These animals are screaming in terror, and the way they're brought up, and the slaughter and everything else, you are eating that terror. And I think this rise of violence that we're seeing and anger that we're seeing is very much coming from that consumption.
I think I've seen that kind of thing as well.
Yep.
And yes, I mean, the caterer were using sources, everything, carefully, organically. And yes, I might have, well, we'll see where we end up in May, but that's the way we're leaning right now. But I was glad to at least get beef off of the
right. Yeah.
So, we all have to do the best we can.
And that's the thing, is that, he's used to his traditional. Yeah. And like, for people, don't take away my burger. Well, you can have a delicious Beyond Meat burger. And again, if people eat it without knowing it, right? And it's like, how was that? Again, our preconception of what something is very often gets in the way of us accepting doing something differently.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
But, doing, as you said, the 80-20, just introducing those changes. And I know you've got I don't know, where were we at 3? Where your next stage of what we can do?
Oh, yes. In terms of the packaging we were going to talk about. So a couple of things. One is that the decor that we buy for, well, Halloween is past now, but for Christmas coming up and the other December holidays, and to a certain extent even Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving, There's just, I think if we understand the issues with plastic, then, sorry, did you mean the Thanksgiving three, or
Well,
did you mean the magic
industry
three?
in general, which is
Yeah,
escalated
yeah.
at holiday times.
Yeah, so I think whatever we can do to reduce the plastic we bring into our lives is a good thing. And let me just quickly run through the problems with plastic. You named a lot of them at the beginning, but as you said, health of the ecosystem is an issue.
Yes.
Health of the people who live near the facilities that take the fossil fuels and create the polymers that become plastic. Very toxic, carcinogenic pollutants come out of those, which are terrible for the people that live near them and that work at those facilities.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about our own health. We are ingesting, we are breathing in, we are drinking and eating plastic every week. I've seen data that says a credit card's worth of plastic is on average what we are ingesting every week. Mm-hmm. And they have not yet done the studies. They've found microplastics in placenta. You know, it's everywhere.
Yes.
And the data is not in on what the health effects for the rest of the populations that don't live near these facilities are. And then, so we need to be probably worried about that, and probably in another 5 years they'll come out with that data. And then there is very good data on the connection with climate change. Production of plastic, fossil fuel-based material, is carbon intensive when it's produced, and we are projected to quadruple the amount of plastic that will be made by 2050. So and I just saw data a couple weeks ago that plastic production will overtake coal in terms of carbon emission, contributions. So lots of reasons why, and I don't want to say that all plastic is terrible. The medical industry needs plastic. There are lots of plastics as have been important in development and transportation of goods. But the thing we need to focus on is that single-use plastic, the stuff that we touch for a few minutes, maybe sometimes a few seconds. We buy it every week. For me, it used to be the plastic water bottle. I used to buy 1 or 2 of these a day, which meant Stephanie Miller, was going through 600 to 700 bottles a year that I was throwing away. Now I take my reusable bottle with me wherever I am. It's never far away. And as long as you live in an area, and I think you do in BC, where the water is very drinkable, there's just no reason to have to buy water in plastic bottles. And then you said something earlier that was really interesting. I think once you start down the path, you start to, I like to think of it as a game. You start to, it becomes a gateway to consciousness about all the plastic, single-use plastic that we are bringing into our lives on a regular basis. When you start to really focus on that, and then when you find something that you can substitute, like in my case, the plastic water bottle, you say, aha, what else could I do away with that I'm currently buying in plastic? And there's almost always a more sustainable alternative than plastic, whether it's glass or metals or paper. There's almost always an alternative that is more sustainable than plastic. So that's
there's biodegradable plastic. I mean, if you have a dog, there's the biodegradable doggy bags, which break down a lot quicker. And actually, I've had a couple of times where I've put my hand in my coat, next winter to find crumbs there from the bag that's broken down. But you can also get these green bags, so that if you want to wrap something up in plastic to put in your fridge, they are, again, they're reusable. Right. So, and they are also eco-friendly. So the thing is,
do you mean the silicone bags?
They're made of the I know they're green here. I'm not quite sure, but they are basically, if you did throw them away, they will break down. But they're also they're breathable too. So, like, if you put your food in plastic, sometimes it's not good to do that. but to put it in one of these bags is that it's breathable too, which is also very important. So there are stacks of options, and there are many industries that have turned over into providing these sustainable and more environmentally and ecologically friendly ways of doing things. And it's just, it, you can Google it,
Yes,
they're
yes,
there.
yeah, absolutely. I think, again, it's when you open your eyes and you realize here's the problem and here's my part of the problem, then you can start to look for solutions. And, my hierarchy is basically whatever I can get that is made from a reused, well, anything I can get that is reusable and ideally made from something that already was mined or produced, recycled materials, those are great. We were talking about food waste, and here's a little intersection between food waste and plastic is I use jars. A lot of people in the zero waste community do to store food. It's nice because if they're transparent, glass is transparent usually, then you can see what's in there. I think a lot of food waste in the fridge becomes, waste, not edible anymore because we don't know what's in those containers because we can't see, right? So I have some Pyrex containers that I use, and again, I even bring my own containers to restaurants when I don't feel like cooking and I want takeout, so that I don't end up having delivery in always plastic containers. I bring my own reusable containers to the restaurant, and nobody's ever said no to me. They will agree to put my food in my own containers. And that's another, during COVID, that's been a big source of additional plastic that people are bringing into their homes, is all the takeout delivery restaurant food. And if you focus on it, there are other solutions. Another one that I love is, I think you talked about bringing your own bags to the grocery store. So I also bring my own produce bags to the grocery store, so I don't have to use those plastic ones that they have there. And that's, in the zero waste world, you've probably heard of this. It's called shopping naked. Basically, you're looking for you're fully clothed, but you're looking for fruits and vegetables that are not packaged in any way. And that pretty much now dictates what I will buy at the store. And what's really interesting and a bit surprising before you focus on it, is that there's a vast quantity of stuff, even in your regular grocery stores, that is unpackaged. They sell green peppers unpackaged right next to the green peppers that are packaged in plastic. So I have a choice, It's not so hard.
It kind of reminds me again, where I grew up, we had open markets Wednesdays and Saturdays, right? And you would take your shopping basket along and just fill everything up. There also was a big store thing. You went in there, the butcher was there, the fish person was there. You would order, and then you would pick it up on your way out after having a nice little lunch at the restaurant there. And everything was, came locally, right? And that's, what we enjoyed. We get food now, from different parts of the world. And yes, they have to be properly, wrapped in order to get to us safely. But it's, we can't do anything about that right now. But the other thing that's coming out is the glass containers with the sealed lids that are suction lids. And they're fantastic. If you don't have the glass jars, they're fantastic. You can see what's going in there. They stack on top of each other very easily. Easily throw it in a bag. If you're going to a restaurant and say, put my leftovers in here, there's those solutions. And no, don't worry if somebody's looking at you crazy. While they're looking at you crazy, at the back of their mind, they're going, that's a good idea. Right?
I will say every time I have picked up my restaurant takeout in my own containers, anytime anyone has said anything to me, it's always been a very positive thing. There'll be a customer behind me that says, I didn't know you could do that. And so hopefully next time she will, ask for the same thing. I think the way to think about it is you're setting a trend. And this is actually one of the most exciting parts of the research that I did for the book was talking to an Oxford professor about social norms and how powerful social norms are. It's incredible. There's really good research on how much we influence each other through our subtle and not subtle actions. And it's so powerful to realize that, you know, if you post on social media about your trip to the farmer's market, you are influencing those people who are in your life. And if you talk about why you go to the farmer's market, then they will maybe, you know, read it and understand what you're doing. But even just being at the farmer's market and pulling out your own bag, people you don't even know will notice what you're doing, and you begin to set a trend. And it takes a little bit of courage, but not that much, I think.
You're being invitational. You're inviting people. You're, you know, inspiration begets invitation, right? So I did a series called Let's Get Sync series, where I interviewed people from around the world, and they were working with governments and individuals and corporations on the mental environmental climate change before even the climate change could be about, because until they change the thinking, you know, one of the guys that's pure necessity is his business, and it's about people, planet for profit, not the other way around, which is, you know, basically 70s, 80s and 90s was profit at the expense of planet and people. We know that that's not working. We know we're paying a price for that, and we know that that needs to be switched around. So if we're looking at investing in the people's well-being, the planet's well-being, all life forms on this planet, because every living creature has a right to live here, when we're looking at that balance of being in there, because we're out of balance. And if we're looking at that balance being there, we'll understand there is no sacrifice in profit, because the profit will actually grow even more so. So I think a lot of industries, you know, are changing because they realize by being more sustainable, both to the client and to the planet, will mean more longevity and more profit. And so the thinking is changing. But we, the consumers, are going to also dictate how industry changes by our own practices and what we demand the change should be.
Absolutely. I think we have such a powerful voice in our consumer choices, and we need to use that voice. Absolutely. I can tell you a quick story if you want. When I started on this journey, before I even knew I was starting on the journey, I had just quit my job, and I did this thing I'd always wanted to do, which is go into my dry cleaners and say, would you mind putting I used to go every week, right? Because I was wearing suits and it's terrible industry from a chemicals perspective. But, you know, a lot of my clothing, I had to be dry cleaned. So I would go in there, and I'd always been bothered by all the plastic packaging around my clothes. And so I don't know why I needed the courage of quitting. I had to quit my job to walk in and say, would you mind putting my clean clothes next time in my own garment bag, which I brought with me? And one thing led to another. I got to talking with the owner, who I'd known for many years in the neighborhood, and she agreed to create a reusable bag program for her clients. So to get to your point about this is good for business, I had some ex-colleagues that were also in the neighborhood that told me they tried, when they heard I did this, they asked their dry cleaners, could they do the same thing? And they said no. And so they moved their business to my dry cleaners. So I think, and you know, during the pandemic, for good reason, dry cleaning business is not doing well because so many people are telecommuting. The dry cleaners I go to is still in business because I think they've got a model. People want to support them. They're doing the right thing. So yes, I think there is a lot to be said for using our voice as consumers, but also for the businesses that realize that they can do something more sustainable. They will be rewarded for that as well.
My son owns a restaurant, and you know, back in the summer we had the heat wave, and in the kitchen it was over 60. So he shut down the kitchen and he just told everyone, I'm terribly sorry, I'm not going to put my staff at risk. And he was commended by his community. The other
Yeah.
day, he literally, it looked like a moat around him, the flooding. You know,
Oh,
fortunately, they managed to get it contained, so it didn't do any damage inside, but it literally was around. And the amount of community that step up to support him because
yeah.
he's there in service of them. And
Yes.
because of this vaccine pass thing right now, and his restaurant is small, the outside is bigger, but when, you know, in the winter, it's smaller inside. And he said, instead of putting people through that, he went to takeout. You can sit inside and eat the takeout, but it's all takeout. And
Right.
every takeout container is biodegradable. Every single
Oh,
thing is set for the plastic forks, but then the plastic forks can go into the recycling, right? But all the
oh,
containers, everything, are biodegradable. And it's, you know, it's about restaurants are slowly changing over and doing this. I went to a Chinese restaurant and everything was in this plastic container. The only
yeah.
thing is, it was a plastic container that I know I can use over and over again.
Yes.
All right, so
That's
I'm
the
not
sort
going.
of thing you can
Yeah,
put your Thanksgiving
yes,
leftovers and
yeah,
send home with guests.
yes, exactly. So don't throw it away.
Yes.
Reuse them, you know, uh, and obviously at some point it will disintegrate. Make sure it goes into the plastic recycling
Yes.
because there are some enormous industries out there that can take that waste. You know, one of the other big wastes was computers and,
Yes.
you know,
That's a big
mechanical parts.
problem.
And I know here in BC there was an organization that started doing a waste just for computers where they could break them right down
Right. Yeah.
and
Oh,
then
that's
and
great.
reuse the plastic. And I think that out of necessity comes innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's interesting. So sorry, what you said earlier. So in the US, plastic forks and plastic cutlery are not accepted in the recycling facilities, but maybe in Canada they are. The problem in the US is the machinery can't take it, or the sorting system.
Mm.
It's too small, and so it ends up getting lost in the whole system. But maybe that's so. Actually, there are some I've seen recently biodegradable
Yes. Well, actually,
cutlery
he
as
has wood
well.
ones too. He has wood.
Oh, bamboo or
Yeah,
wood.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Bamboo straws,
yeah. Oh,
right?
that's great.
All of that.
That's
Yes.
great. Huh.
Mm.
You'll have to tell me the name of your son's restaurant so I
Humble
can.
Roots Cafe, Maple Ridge, BC. So,
Okay, next time I'm there.
yeah, and he uses locally sourced, you know, farmers and things like that, and they're actually coming up into their fourth year, and the amount of support that he gets from his community, because his community recognizes that that he's not doing everything for profit.
Yeah.
You know, and the amount of times that he's closed because he wants to give his staff a break or there's some issue going on. When a couple of his chefs had vaccines, they had reactions and said, sorry, we're closing early, let them go home and rest.
Good.
And he put the humanity first. And this is again, I've done over 2,000 shows, many business shows. And the amount of people that are realizing, put the people first.
Yes.
Put the survival of the planet first. Put life first. The reward is going to be hundreds of times more than being at the expense of it. And with COVID, look at the shift. You know, a Fortune 500 CEO. You know, and all of a sudden, nobody gives a damn about you because what are you doing for the people? And what we're looking at the forefront, the truck drivers, the nurses, the janitors, the people working at the cafe, you know, at the stores for food for us, putting their own lives there at risk. They became the heroes. The shift went because we started looking at, you go into a company, if it's not clean, doesn't that immediately have an effect of going, well, you know, this is very dirty and tidy. Do I want to do business with these people? Right. So your janitor has set the stage. How much credit does that janitor get?
More now, I think you're right. Yeah. More now than before.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, you know, appreciation is something that we could all step into because not only of each other, gratitude of the fact of the resources that we do have. And we're asking you to make changes. But these changes aren't, you know, like we're asking you to go and fly to the moon, you know, and we watch all these.
Your job.
Quit your job, yeah. And if you still love meat, we're asking you to eat the organic meat and not the manufactured meat, which is not only cruel and horrific on the animals, but the methane and the water and everything else. Those practices need to go. Um, we're just asking you to be more conscious of your own carbon footprint.
Yes, yes, and we can go very far.
Yeah,
If enough of us do that, we can transform everything.
it's up to us.
It is.
It-
It
you know,
is not
if,
only up to us, but it is also up to us.
yes, but
That's what I believe.
I mean, look at the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter movement, Greta, and the environmental movement, is that when people have the courage to stand up and say no more, and collectively say we invite other people to join in, we are incredible at making the changes necessary. Right? So why our planet's in trouble, our health is in trouble, economically we're imbalanced. We need to step up, folks. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit more forceful. I'm not tired of being polite.
I agree. We do need to be forceful. Yes, I think it's an invitation, but it's an invitation to a party everybody needs to attend.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you because, our kids think that food grows in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And, and I think, take them to a farm, take them to a vegetable farm, show them where things, start growing food yourself. If you're in an apartment, you can get the vertical things where you can grow. Right? Start being more conscious about where things come from, and then you'll have more appreciation, more value for them, and be more conscious of the waste of them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are solutions to be had from the past. You were talking, I think, earlier in the podcast about your, when we can look to some trends that have been lost in the process, whether it's repairing your jeans. I have one pair of jeans. They really need to be repaired, but I'm not getting rid of them.
The torn and shredded jeans, people are paying $300 or $400 for those. So if you've got them, you're just in fashion.
My jeans became more valuable last week as the knee hole grew larger. But there is so much to be. I mean, I think about my own grandmother who is not with us now, but so many things that I'm doing now harken back to the sort of what I saw her doing when I was young. And then there are many things that technology and new ways need to be introduced into our lives. Like you talked about the beef alternatives that are practically, you can barely taste the difference.
No.
If I told you, you probably wouldn't know the difference.
No, and I know this for a fact because people haven't.
So we need both, right?
Yes.
We need some harkening back to the past and some practices that really made a lot of sense, that made good use of the resources that were available. And then we need the new technologies that will get us through this next period. But we ourselves as individuals can and must be part of the difference.
I saw a little documentary a couple of years ago. Can't remember the name of it, but it was a couple of guys that had gone to the government about closing down coal and looking for alternative, and government wasn't listening. And so they decided to go about it themselves. And so they had at that point closed down 29 coal plants and taken each person, either retired them early or taken them and re-educated them into technology or industries, industries, so that all of these people that were reliant on either mining, coal, this, that, etc., you're taking away my job. No, we're going to redirect you into something that is not only more sustainable for the planet, healthier for you, and one that you can make more money and be at less risk. And the response from these towns and these places of complete rejuvenation and opening up to so many other opportunities. And they didn't wait for government. They said, we're just going to do it ourselves. And that's the thing. You get a group of people together with the money and the power behind them, and to say, we're just going to do this. And it can be done.
yeah, sometimes they don't even need the money and the power.
Right. They just
Sometimes
need the
they
people.
just need, yeah, the people.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean,
People are the
little
power.
Greta.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what I love about Greta? I mean, she has autism, which just shows the whole stigma of autism, of people that they can't function. That's a whole lot of codswallop. But she also doesn't take any BS.
Yes. Yeah. Which I also really appreciate about her, because the truth, things need to be put out there. And I think she tells it like it is, which is necessary at the moment.
We need more like her.
We do. Many, many more. But kudos to her.
Yes.
She's really changed the conversation. So I'm a very big admirer of
Yes. Yeah.
Greta.
Yeah. Excuse me, coughing fit here.
No problem.
Your book, I know it's behind you. Bring it forth and tell us about a little bit about the book. I know we've covered a lot of it in the show, but a little more about the book, and also how people can get hold of it.
Yeah, so I wrote this book, Zero Waste Living, the 80-20 Way, the Busy Person's Guide to a Lighter Footprint, during the pandemic. In fact, it came out a year ago, end of October last year. And I was asked to write the book by a publisher who was creating a series called Resetting Our Future. And it was about the notion of taking a whole bunch of ideas that could be planted now or then during the pandemic, and hopefully have them grow. And I wrote this book because I was a really busy person in my career. I was actually leading climate change. I was helping government and private sector get on a more sustainable path, but in my own life, I didn't feel like I was doing enough as an individual. And so, you know, as we talked about, once I left that career after 25 years, I took some time off, did some research, and realized there were so many things I could have been doing all these years that wouldn't have required me to quit my job. I could have integrated them into my life. And they are around those three things we talked about: food, plastics, and recycling. And I wrote this book because I wish I'd known what I know now. A few years ago, I would have done them. And now I want every other busy person that I talk to see it's so easy and so rewarding, and has actually brought so much joy into my life. And so, yes, and the book is available any place you buy books. It's available on Amazon. You can ask for it at your independent bookstores. They can order it if they don't have it in stock. My local bookstore carries it, which is great. And yeah, so it is 1 year, and the message is still very much alive.
And will be for a long time. Yeah, this is
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those messages that will gather momentum, you know, but it's a message that's going to be current for a long time to come. And I know that they can also get the book for resettingourfuture.com. And the interesting thing is, actually, I just interviewed Dr. Joseph Tranquil on, you know, on the long haul COVID, and it looks like a few other interesting people here too. So, you know, I'm glad to see that these kind of books have been put together, because you're all kind of following that same theme, you know, of what we can do, what we can be empowered to do. And that's the important thing, is that I'm a huge person on collaboration and on community. And when we come together, you know, in collaboration as a community, we are serving our community in such a way that everybody benefits. Yeah. And, you know, we've tried the individual me, myself, and I route. And, you know, that kind of opulence has cost other people. And I think if we kind of look into what's best for our community, and a community could be your family, could literally be the people where you know where you live. I'm very much about the village, everybody coming together and raising the kids and supporting one another, and celebration and being there for one another. And I think if we can go back to that, we will see the sharing of resources. And maybe one person's got a damn good compost thing, and so you don't all have to have one. You go over there, and if somebody else has got something else, and we'll go over and drop our stuff off there. And that's community. right?
Yeah.
We're not meant to do it just on our own, but on our own, we can start taking steps to become part of that community.
Yes, yes. And I'm smiling because one of the things I mention in the book is about be a collection point, and so when I'm going to return corks at a store that will take corks, I let my friends know and they drop them off, and then I have another friend who collects something else, and we all put it in that pile. And when I talk about the joys of doing this, it is very much what you're saying. It's
Yes,
about being more in touch with our community, which now maybe during the pandemic is more important than ever before,
yes.
because we've lost so much in terms of connections over the past year and a half. And yeah, it's really, it feels good to be part of a community that is trying to do the right thing.
Stephanie has another tip for us for Thanksgiving, and anytime that you know, Christmas, Thanksgiving, or you have a gathering, it's a wonderful little tip. What is it, Stephanie?
Yeah, so when you're gathering, I think a lot of us think, a lot of people, too much cleanup. I'm going to move from what I would normally do, regular plates on the table, to plasticware or disposables of some kind. And what I think we ought to rethink is, let's go ahead and do what we can with what we have without resorting to all the disposables. So I'm thinking plates, silverware, cups, and napkins. If we can have all of those be non-reusable, or the ones we have in the house, great. If we can't do all of those, we can mix and match. You can have some paper cups with your own ceramic plates. You could even ask guests to, when they ask, what could I bring? You could say, well, we're going to be 12 people. Could you bring a set of cloth napkins? Then they're contributing to the evening, and they can take them home with them and wash them, and that's less cleanup for you. So I think less waste is less waste. If you can chip away at it, and especially for these big gatherings, there's a big opportunity.
I'm going to add something to that too. All the bottles of wine and the cans afterwards. I collect them for my 88-year-old nephew, and she gives them to them as pocket money for them, right?
Oh,
But maybe you know of some homeless people. So you can collect the bottles for them and give the money to them, or give them the bottles if they have their own little trolley to go around. Please don't throw them in the garbage. Please don't throw them just out. They can be their money. They're all money. 5 cents, 2 cents, doesn't matter. To somebody, that could be their meal that day. That could be their shelter. So, know of a place, or even drop them off at a place that you know that will accept them and they can make money out of them. But please don't just throw in the landfill. This is money you're throwing away, and this is money that you could give to someone else, where it could be the difference between eating that day and not.
yes, and we need those deposit schemes.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think fortunately, you have them in Canada. We don't have them for the most part in the US
really?
anymore.
Oh,
Unfortunately, I remember them from my childhood.
yes, no, we have them abundantly here.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't.
Oh,
But it is still important that it ends up in the right place. And,
yes.
So if it's an aluminum can, that is highly recyclable. Aluminum is highly recyclable. It melts down and back on the shelf in 60 days, saves 95% energy compared to mining virgin resources.
Right.
So I think whether it's in Canada where you can actually get a deposit back, or in the recycle bin where it can be properly,
Yes.
melted down and remade, those are really important things.
Yeah. And the same with the glass. The
yes.
glass, they can, melt down or do whatever they do with it,
Yes.
but they can dispose of it properly.
Glass and metals are infinitely recyclable.
Yes, exactly. So, please be conscious of that as well, folks. There's always something to do. And I love the idea with the napkins, even maybe the tablecloth. I'm in charge of the linen. Maybe somebody could say, I'm in charge of the cutlery. And maybe the host could be in charge of the glasses, and somebody, we're going to bring our own plates. This is contribution. This is collaboration, right?
Yes.
And I know the host maybe want to have the table all beautiful. They can drop everything off the day before.
Exactly.
Right? And the host can set it all up, and at the end of the evening, they just put it in a container and take it home and responsible for it. And that's just being kind to your hosts, that they haven't got to do everything themselves as well.
And everyone will feel like they've contributed, which also is a nice thing.
Yes, exactly. Lovely tip. Thanks a lot, love. And your own site is zerowastedc.com. It's a lovely site. You really do
Indeed.
kind of lay things out beautifully. And, you know, focus on the food, purge the plastic, recycle right, and, you know, all of the options that are there, which is wonderful. I believe you blog here as well.
I blog, I post on Instagram, Zero Waste in DC. I give workshops on the focus on food, on recycling right. So whatever I can do to get the word out, that's my mission right now.
Good. As a mission, I back up very much so.
Thank you.
And I know you're on Facebook, Zero Waste DC, and on Instagram, Zero Waste DC, and then LinkedIn, it's under your name, Stephanie J. Miller, right?
Yes.
Excellent. And, you know, I love interviewing people like you because you're being proactive, but you're being solutional. So you're giving people the solutions of what they can do. And, you know, when you talked about the water in the flask, you're going for coffee, picking up coffee, take your own coffee cup.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know, it's your own coffee cup. You're not using any waste. Generally, it's a thermos, so it lasts longer anyway, and it doesn't get cold by the time you get to the car. You know, there's so many things we can do, and they are acceptable. I don't care if you get sideward glances. You've planted a seed.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yes. That's a great example too. I love that example.
Everything is possible. And I'm a huge person on potlucks and, you know, having potluck parties, and even this Thanksgiving, you know, people can bring their old casserole dishes around, and then at the end of it, you know, you want to take some home, here you go. And it's just, let's just be not just mindful, but let's be heartful.
Yes.
If we come at it from that heart, let's be kind to the planet, let's be kind to one another, let's be kind to our resources. This planet provides everything for us, everything. If we start looking at her with some appreciation and more caring and kindness to the way we treat her, she will carry on providing for us for eons to come. All of the problems that we have with the climate now is due to us as human beings. And that opulence and that entitlement needs to kind of be reined in. We can have it all. We're just asking people to have it more consciously.
Yes. Well said. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing here, Stephanie. This has been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much. I love the conversation with you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for writing the book and making it easy. Please go to her site, zerowastedc.com, right?
In DC. Zero Waste in DC.
In DC, don't forget the in, folks.
Yes.
And which doesn't mean it's only in DC. This can be taken anywhere. It's just an example of what she's doing in DC, which can be adopted and adapted to anywhere. But if you don't know what to do and you don't know where to start, the book is a great place and the site is a great place. Her blogs are a great place. Just one foot in front of the other, folks. But please put that one foot in front of the other. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And to everyone else out there, remember, we're all inhabitants here. We're all guests here. And that means we all need to be a little more mindful of our own actions. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. You will hear many, many shows here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. We have new shows for you out every week. Just find them on our podcast or What's New. If you feel that you have something to share that makes a difference in the lives of others, or you too feel that you could be a host, please contact me at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com and we will be glad to speak with you. Have a wonderful day.